In VoiceAttack you can set and retrieve what is in the clipboard, which is what the computer stores when you press Ctrl-C to copy something. You can also use the voice commands in a profile for editing that profile. I have an interesting use case for combining these. Some months ago I tried making a voice profile for the Steam version of Ticket to Ride. The most challenging part of this is having to set the 80 or so individual coordinates for every single route, as well as naming them for going in both directions. I did manage that by developing a few tricks and battling a couple of bugs, but once I finished, there was a serious error I'd overlooked. When you click on a card type to drag it to a given route, the center of the card is snapped to where the cursor is, but it's the top left of the card that needs to be placed on the route, not the now invisible cursor. This means every single one of my coordinates was off by a fixed amount, which I had to estimate by taking very careful screenshots, noting coordinates in Paint, and taking averages in Excel. But even with these values known, manually adjusting each command by loading up its mouse movement, and I guess subtracting the numbers in my head, was going to be awful. Here is how it behaves at the moment. Denver to Kansas City. Helena to Winnipeg. 1 of 3. Kansas City to St. Louis. See there how it missed and went for a different route. My solution is to set up a repeating loop in VoiceAttack, which I can terminate with terminate. The repeating loop command assumes that one of the commands is already selected in the Edit a Profile window. It presses Enter to start editing the command, waits a moment, presses Tab 10 times to get to the part of the window with the commands in it, presses down to be selecting the one with the mouse coordinate, then opens that up for editing, waiting a moment for it to load. Tabbing once selects the X coordinate, which is cut to the clipboard, converted into an integer, 51 is taken away from it. That new integer is then set back to the clipboard and pasted. It then tabs to the Y coordinate and does the same thing, subtracting 49 from it. It clicks OK to save this altered mouse coordinate, waits a moment, then saves this altered command, waits a moment, then presses down so that it selects the next command. I've put an endless loop around this, so it will keep going until I say terminate. This loop will end up shifting every single coordinate value, though it's important to stop it at the right time, otherwise it would repeatedly subtract values from the last command. Here it is in action. Subtraction. Terminate. Now in a surprise twist, this didn't work. I did the wrong coordinate shift. Because the coordinate on the card is up and to the left of the cursor, I needed to move it down and to the right. But I did the opposite, moving the cursor further away from the route and the target even further away. So it's important to remember that as well as carefully measuring coordinates, draw a diagram and test your first few commands. Now instead of subtracting 51 horizontally and 49 vertically, I need to add 102 horizontally and 98 vertically. This should move the cursor down and to the right of where it used to be, and the target right onto the route. Fortunately, this is very easy to amend in the subtraction command. It will be a little dull to have to spend another 12 minutes watching it all again, but this is much more comfortable than the alternative. Subtraction. Another approach to this would be to make a separate shift command, moving by the appropriate displacement, and make every single route command run this shift command before it clicks where it thinks the route is. This means if I made an error here in the shift command, or if the cursor needed to hover briefly on its target, or I just needed to do some other behavior before clicking, I can just edit the solitary shift command instead of having to re-edit all 80 root commands. The downside is that the cursor would jump around a bit before it drops the card, so not suitable if you don't like seeing a one-frame jump. Now with all of that done, 3 of 5. Montreal to New York. Two of 4. Duluth to Sault Ste. Marie. 3 of 3. Sault Ste. Marie to Toronto. 'In this profile, I happen to have about 80 commands in which the coordinate actions are in the same place in the list of actions. But for most profiles with clicking locations, this will not generally be true, and so you would not be able to set up a loop to do this all in one go. You can still set up a looping routine, which, when it has a command selected, presses Enter, and then gets to the list of actions, but will then start a particular loop depending on a variable. Then use basic voice commands for pressing up and down to select the mouse movement action. Then use another voice command with similar code to the subtraction command from before, in order to scale the coordinates. This would need to be done for each mouse movement action inside each command. But because you can use the up and down commands to select each one, and then activate the scaling function, that still makes it enormously easier than doing it entirely with voice finger or Dragon Naturally Speaking. Once all the coordinates in a given command are adjusted, you can either give a voice command, something like finished, to change the integer value and terminate the secondary loop in the looping routine, or alternatively have the other routine not have any loops, and be a single-use action that saves one command then loads the next one. This would avoid the need for the variable-controlled loop and the finished command. So in doing this, you can still correct your entire profile by voice alone. Another application you might have for this looping correction is if the game in question needs you to move the mouse more slowly. There are options in the mouse movement window to animate movement, which will cover the distance in a stated number of steps in a stated amount of time. It also has this option ease movement, which will move the mouse quickly to start with, but it will slow down towards its destination. I have encountered 1 or 2 games that needed this animated movement, such as Gorogoa, and it would have been much easier to update the commands with a loop, or even simply having a command that, when I've moved on to this particular action, will click through and set the values accordingly. Now, as well as shifting the coordinates in your profile, this technique can be used for scaling them. All of my profiles are set for a window size of 1280 by 720, but if I got a larger monitor and played it at 1920 by 1080, all the coordinates would be wrong. Now, if the user interface happened to fully scale to the screen resolution, which happens a fair amount of the time, then I could correct my coordinates by scaling them in a similar way to me shifting them earlier. The way to do this mathematically is to take the x-coordinate, multiply it by the new resolution's width, then divide it by the old resolution's width. Similarly, multiply the y-coordinate by the new resolution's height, then divide by the old resolution's height. Note that if you do this the other way round, dividing first, integer division will convert both coordinates to 0, before multiplying them by the new resolution to get 0. So multiplying then dividing is best. Given a number, you can convert to decimals, divide first, multiply second, then convert back. But it's much easier to multiply first, divide second, and just stick with whole numbers.